You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahana. I'm here with Bob.
Absolutely.
Or Brett Newcomb, whichever.
You are so clever.
Whichever you prefer. We were just talking about Bob. So what about him? You and I have been on excessively long road trips where we've been driving for 12, 13, 14 hours at a time. And we've had our friend Paul in the car who listens to our conversations, and when he has had enough, he goes off and does his own thing, right? Whether that is sleep or whatever. But we have never, ever, in the history of my knowing you, we have never, ever had a time when we didn't have anything to talk about.
Well, because you're always willing to talk about you.
And I would say the same about you. But yet I have had experiences where I have gone. I just recently, a gentleman from our church who actually married my daughter had a party.
He's your daughter's husband, or he performed the ceremony?
He performed the ceremony.
Okay, I asked you.
Okay, maybe that wasn't clear. Yes, he's
because
a
we're
pastor.
Talking about communication skills.
Yeah, he's a pastor at my church,
Okay,
and he married my daughter. He had a party celebrating a business accomplishment that I went to, and talking to people, some of whom I knew there, some of whom I was just meeting, and the conversation goes for a little bit, and then it's kind of like, okay, we've kind of covered all the ground that we have in common, and so then you kind of just drift out of that conversation and into a new one.
Or there's a lull at 10 after and 20 till.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Oh,
But there's research that supports that.
really?
If you're involved in conversations like at a party or something, at 10 after and 20 till, there'll be a quiet where everybody kind of catches their breath and looks around and go, what are we going to talk about now?
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
But so what I'm wondering is, what's the difference between something like you and I, who are never want for...
Well, I would say it was 35 years of knowing each other pretty carefully, but my wife and I can ride in the car for 10 hours and not talk to each other.
And that's okay.
Not extensively. I mean,
So-
you need to stop and go to the bathroom, or
But that's...
oh look, there's a
So, but that's so you guys are okay with silence.
Yeah.
Which is different than what I think this article is talking about, which is good communication skills.
Well, that's what the article is talking about: good communication skills and issues that people have with their communication skills, which I think is important and relevant. Communicating well doesn't mean talking all the time.
Right.
And
So the first thing that they identify as a behavior to avoid is interrupting.
yeah, did you just do that?
No,
Oh, I was gathering my thoughts.
while you were gathering your... But that's what I was going
You
to...
feel the silence?
You and I, who both love to hear our own voice,
Yeah.
and will speak loquaciously for extended periods of time, we never interrupt each other, or very rarely do we ever interrupt each other.
I don't think you listen to us very carefully.
So, but I've heard, yes, and I've even had people write into the show saying, "Oh, why do you guys interrupt each other so much?" And I'm like, I don't think we've ever interrupted each other.
See, yeah, I think we do it all the time.
But that's so funny to me that an outside observer would say, oh yeah, you guys interrupt each other all the time, but that's never my experience. So I think there's a difference. So my point being,
So for you, an interruption is a change in direction, like a take it away from. Whereas what we are doing, when other people say you're interrupting each other, we are participating or immersing ourselves in a continuous flow.
No, what I'm saying is I think that interrupting is a subjective thing on the part of both participants that may be very different and may be very fluid. So what my point is that if I was talking to somebody about communication skills and I said, don't interrupt the other person, I think that I would need to be very careful about recognizing that that is a very subjective thing. And if
I agree. I think I just interrupted you.
But I didn't experience that as an interruption.
Yeah, because you can see my nonverbals, and you saw that I really had something important to say, so you were willing to surrender the floor.
Yeah.
I think, too, there's a distinction that needs to be made between males and females, because I've heard an awful lot of women complain that men interrupt them thoughtlessly, without awareness, don't even know they're doing it, that a man's thought obviously has more weight and importance than a woman's thought. And so if she's busy saying something and you have a random thought, you just feel free to speak it out, where women are trained to wait until there's a break in the flow and insert themselves at an appropriate time. There actually is a linguist who specializes in gender communication issues named Deborah Tannen, who's written a number of books about this issue, male-female communication patterns. One is That's Not What I Meant. The other one is You Just Don't Understand. And I think a third one is From 9 to 5.
Okay.
But they're all excellent books. They all focus on
those are the titles of the books. I thought that those were
styles. Yeah. But interrupting is one of, any book on communication styles will talk about the frustration and importance of interrupting. For one thing, is a power dynamic. If I feel free to interrupt, like a boss feels free to interrupt a subordinate. A parent feels free to interrupt a child. Children are trained not to interrupt their parents. You learn the power hierarchies. Unless there's an emergency, unless there's an overriding reason, as a courtesy and as an appropriate behavior, you wait till I finish and then you speak.
And you said something that I think is super, super relevant, that I can see your nonverbals.
Yeah.
And so, and I have
when the
known
light
you
bulb
long
goes
enough.
on, you see it.
Yeah. And so that changes my experience of whether or not we are interrupting each other. You may not be as familiar, if you've just met someone at a party, you may not be as familiar with their nonverbals and what those mean. So it may be harder to be able to pick up on that. So if we wanted to encourage a client to practice not interrupting, what would we tell them to do?
Try to be more consciously aware
Of?
their surround. Who's talking, what they're saying, what's going on, what are the circumstances. I remember when I was in high school, I took a course, it was one semester course on social intercourse, on how does a man introduce a woman, how do you introduce your father to your friend, how do you shake hands, how do you fill out a business letter, how do you make reservations, all these things, how do you answer the phone, what do you say. I've trained my son to, as he was growing up, to say, Newcomb resident, Spencer speaking, instead of just, hello.
Right.
You are trained to do it the appropriate way for your cohort, your surround. I find a distinction, you keep talking about parties and socializing, I find a distinction that I make. Am I getting paid? Do I have a responsibility? Am I on the clock? If I'm on the clock, I'm much more social and socially interactive. If I'm not on the clock, I'll go sit in the corner and read a book or watch the party flow. I don't need to mix and mingle and chat with all the people. I actually don't really want to.
And so if we were coaching someone, counseling someone, we were talking to them about communication, and we could even say in the context of a couple, not even just party. What is a good thumbnail rule to be able to interrupt less?
Well, in a counseling situation, what we sometimes do and sometimes recommend that clients do when they go home is have like a speaking stick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're having a family conversation and there's a discussion about something important and everybody has an opinion and emotional enthusiasm, but you have trouble getting a piece of the table, you give them a wand, a stick. It's like comes from the Indian tribes. You couldn't speak without the speaking stick. So the only one allowed to talk is the one holding the stick. And when you finish your comment, somebody else takes the stick, then they can talk. So you teach that mainly to teach the awareness of the communication patterns. Do you dominate? Do you interrupt? Is this a problem? People are telling you that it is, but you're not aware of it. So if you have to hold a stick in your hand, you become more aware of it. You become more conscious of it. And so it's like, whoa, I didn't know I was doing that. So
if the person wants to be invested, and hopefully if they're coming to talk to a therapist about this, they're invested in it. But so
do you want to be a better communicator? Or do you want to be divorced?
Right. So they start to learn the flow of communication with their partner, and they start to become, hopefully, whether they're consciously or unconsciously, more aware of what the nonverbal cues are that indicate whether or not that person is done speaking. So one nonverbal cue is that the person stops speaking. And then that is an invitation for a response. But sometimes people pause, and you have to be able to read the difference between what is a pause and what is a completed thought.
Yeah. Is it a hesitation?
Right.
While they decide what to say, or have they finished and now you can have a turn?
Yeah.
And actually an awful lot of conversations are turn taking. And we've seen the research, it's just not in this article, but we've seen the research that talks about if I talk as fast as I possibly can, put every word together with no pauses, no hesitations, no punctuation gaps, I can get out about 150 words a minute. Your brain can hear, process, play with about 350 words a minute. So you're way ahead of me. And so you're processing, and then you start a rebuttal, you start your speech, and you start looking for an opportunity to have a turn. And non-verbally, you will cue that to me. Raise an eyebrow, open your mouth, take a breath, lift your finger up, signal me, okay, I got what you're going to say, shut up, now listen to what I have to say. That dance is that non-verbal kinesthetic dance of communication that we all do, but some of us do it more consciously and deliberately because we've learned these things.
Maybe you've even said this before, but I'm just now getting it. So a human being can hear and process information faster than a person can speak it.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to you, and
you're playing with it in your head the whole time.
But I'm completing your thought. I'm assuming that I know how this is going to end, and I'm constructing my rebuttal.
Right.
Which means that I'm not really paying attention to you.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's reality.
And so then I've constructed my response before you've stopped, and then I may charge into that more quickly than you're ready to surrender the floor because
distress. But so this article talks about 3 specific behaviors.
Yeah.
And it's a subset from the article that talks about 6 different behaviors.
Right.
None of us use just one of them.
Yeah.
They don't happen in a vacuum. Oh, this is a problem with interrupting. Like we were talking about, women feel like they're constantly and chronically interrupted. Even professional women at a professional office feel like that's the way it works. And some of them feel they have to be more assertive, more dominant, more aggressive, claim their space, get in your face about don't interrupt me, you just interrupt me again. And men will swear they didn't. They're not even aware that they do it, unless they are aware and they're doing it on purpose. So interrupting is one of these things, but it's a web that we weave when we try to communicate. It's a dance. It's a verbal dance and a nonverbal dance. There are a couple of others. One-upping. If I make a statement, I just got back from vacation, I went to this place. You immediately want to tell me someplace you went that was better, someplace that you went that was more exciting, more expensive, better weather, whatever it might be. And so you jump in and go, and dismiss your appreciation for my story, and jump in and try to take it away from me by one-upping me. Oh, that's nothing. I did that. You hit a home run. That's nothing. I not only hit a home run, but I went home with the prom queen.
Yeah. So I actually specifically wanted to talk about this one because
Which one?
one-upping.
Okay.
Is that a play for dominance?
Yeah, I think so.
Because that's when I was reading that, that's kind of what was going on in my head, is that that's actually a play for dominance. And so,
Well, they all three are. I mean, this one may be more than the other two, but all three of them are. Because the third one, giving unasked for advice. Let me tell you how to solve this problem. Let me tell you what I know. Let me tell you what I think. Listen to me. Don't talk to me.
Well, so the don't give it and want to ask for advice. That one actually really resonates with me, because I tell the story all the time that when my wife and I got married, she would talk to me about stuff that was going on at work.
Yeah.
And I would say,
try
okay,
to
so
problem
you
solve.
need to do this, and then you need to do that, and then and she would say, well, why are you just? I just want you to listen to what I'm
That's
saying.
a very
Yeah.
common marital or relationship complaint. And it's not just male, female. It's two men in a relationship, two women in a relationship, partners in a relationship struggle with this one, because it goes back to the power dynamics. Who's dominant, who's submissive.
Right. Okay, but I never experienced that, and maybe I'm just fooling myself. But I never experienced it. I mean, my intent in that was not, I can see how one-upping is dominance. I don't know that I see how the
Problem
advice
solving?
one is dominance.
No, Mike, I'm going to say this at the risk of offending you,
Okay.
which I don't really care about. One way or
Yeah,
the
I was
other.
going to say,
If
why
I
would
offend you, we'll work it out. You really are solution focused, and you really offer solutions with a half-cocked gun. You don't always fully listen. You hear enough to get to, oh, this is the direction they're going. I know something about that. Boom, and you have 14 solutions. Your wife is telling you that is at times a problem for her, because she feels invisible or unequal. And so she says that to you, and you look at her and go, I do not. Or, well, but they're great ideas. And she's saying, yeah, but I'm fully capable of taking care of this dynamic myself. I just want to talk it out. I just want an audience.
Right.
So one of the things you need to learn, and I think you have learned it, I think I've seen you use it, is to ask, okay, do you want suggestions, or you just want me to listen?
Yeah.
And she'll tell you.
Okay, so let's run to our break, and I'll respond to that on the other
Okay.
side. You know, if you've gotten this far into the show, then obviously you find the show to be worthwhile, beneficial, maybe even helpful. And so I just wanted to say, if you've gotten this far into the show and you want to help us out, even if you don't want to help us out, just do it anyway. Go to Apple Podcasts and rate us and leave a review. That is super helpful. Subscribe to the show on YouTube and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications when new shows drop. That stuff is really helpful for us. And I know that Mr. Brett agrees.
Absolutely. Reviews are positive. Positive reviews are more positive, but negative ones are as well, because it helps you decide how to focus and how whatever you're intending to say is being heard.
And the secret is the algorithm doesn't care whether the review's positive or negative.
As our friend Mike Norton says regularly, feedback is a gift.
If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and I think I have learned that, at least in the context of my relationship. But and because we are much better about that today than we were 30 years ago.
Known you for a long time, yeah.
But what I'm wondering though is, do you think that is not? I mean, and I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah.
Is it dominant, and I just don't see it because I don't want to see that in myself? Or can you offer advice because you genuinely care about the other person and you don't want them to suffer?
I have a couple of answers to that. Are we talking about professionally or in your relationships?
Well, I guess I'm curious both ways.
Well, I think professionally, you approach counseling from the perspective of they're paying you to get an answer. And you have more experience with this topic or these experiences because you have your experience plus all the clients you've seen over the years that have assimilated in your brain. And so you want to jump in and save them time and money. You just go do this. That'll make things better. Or you need to go say this, and that'll make somebody less unhappy with you. So I think there's a tendency on your part to be more directive in counseling, certainly than I am. We approach it different. We talk about that all the time. But I think that is a reflection of these three communication skill sets that you step all over sometimes in service of a good cause. Then personally, again, going back to our dynamics, we do that to each other, I think, interactively and constantly from a perspective of perceived equality. I don't think we feel one up, one down. We don't measure it statistically. It's just part of the dance that we dance.
Right.
And it irritates the hell out of people who are around us sometimes, and other times it makes them laugh. But it's a thing we do.
Right. But it is so. It is possible that advice giving is not dominance.
Yeah, absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah.
Especially if somebody says, "Hey, man, what do you think?
Yeah.
You've been to Panama. What should I see when I'm in Panama? Oh, well, I would go and see the museum. Yeah, okay.
So, do you think that this article is congruent with the experience that you have in therapy, or do you think that this is just kind of filler? You read it and you say, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but that's about it.
The one place where I think it's consistent is when I think about marriage counseling, when the frustrations in the relationship seem to be dominated by the communication skills, not the intent, not the emotional need that's being missed. If we're pretty anchored on the connectivity and the emotional attachment and respect, then it's a how-to process, and we just need to learn to play the piano. You practice. So we rehearse those things, and we teach specific skills. We do exercises. So I think professionally, it's useful in that domain. But you'd have to ask my wife and kids and friends.
So what it was really interesting, or one of the things that was interesting for me while I was reading this, because I actually followed the link back to the original Psychology Today 6-1, in which I didn't think really added any information.
Because you didn't want me to say, "Oh, Psychology Today again."
Partially, yes, but again, I just didn't think it added any more information. And I had come across the Inc. article before I had come across the Psychology Today article. But especially if you go back to the original Psychology Today article, this is absolutely basic, foundational introduction to AA. This is
interesting.
This is the stuff that, I mean, when you first go into a meeting, these are all the things that they're teaching you to be able to be in the meeting and be an active and productive participant in the meeting. And they don't call it they do call it one-upping, but really they call it alcoholics. Like, don't tell your drug story and try and beat each other out. Like, oh, you think that, well, I got 7 years in prison. Well, I got 25 years in prison.
Yeah,
right?
one-upmanship.
Yeah, who cares? But all of this stuff is just really the basic stuff that you learn when you go into a 12-step program to be able to interact in that environment in a safe, productive way that is respectful. And I was amazed. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, because there's so much about 12-step recovery that it's just like being religious. Does it matter whether you believe in God or not? I don't know. I mean, I do, but I don't require other people to do that. But if you just lived by the tenets of a Christian lifestyle, you have a better life. If you just lived by the
Blaise
tenets...
Pascal wrote that in the 15th century.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Really?
He was a French mathematician, and he wrote an article and said, it makes more sense to live a Christian life because your quality of life is better, whether there's heaven or hell or not after you're dead.
Exactly.
Well, so.
Exactly.
And if you're right, then you get to go to heaven.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you're not right, you'll never know.
And the same thing's true with 12-step recovery. Doesn't matter whether you're, using a drug or not. If you apply the tenets of a 12-step program to your life is probably going to be better than if you didn't. And so it's kind of remarkable to me that these things all just dovetail so perfectly with that 12-step perspective. So I just wanted to point that out.
Your life will be better if you're alert and aware and focused and disciplined and well-behaved and well-thought and nice.
So anybody could improve their marriage by subscribing to a 12-step philosophy.
They learn to say, yes, dear, and my fault. That's all they need.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of counseling with couples.
Yeah.
The hardest thing that I have experienced with doing therapy with couples is stick-to-itiveness. We can talk about these things in therapy. We can even practice the skills. But the only thing that matters is if you take it home and you practice it and enough that it becomes a new habituated behavior. And that is the thing that I see break down, because what happens is that I experience people regressing to their most primitive coping strategies directly proportional to the amount of emotional intensity that they experience. Meaning that when people push your buttons, you act infantile. Most people do. And the people who can push your buttons the most are the people you live with. And so for anybody who wants to apply better communication strategies in their life, you have to be willing to practice that consistently enough that that starts to become a new habituated behavior. And I think that is really hard for people to do.
I think it's a general summary of counseling. You talk to people about, if you are conscious and cognitive, you can choose the way to respond to circumstances. If you go on autopilot, you'll respond the way you've always been trained to respond. Your worldview, your verbiage, your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
When you get flustered and rattled, you're not conscious, you're reacting. You tend to do the things you used to.
Right.
But the hope is in the belief that you can recognize that sooner and stop it faster.
And I was just
You're
going to
go
say,
back there.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to go back there. But when either of you catch it and say, well, oh, we're back there, you can get out cheaper.
Right.
So,
because there are plenty of times when, I've gotten very good at listening to my wife talk about things that happen on her job and not try and solve the problem. But once in a while, she'll say something and I'll feel very protectionistic.
do you say, Kim, can I bloviate about that for a while?
I don't.
You should.
But sometimes I catch myself before I do it and say, oh, don't do that. And I'm very proud of myself and I give myself credit for that. Sometimes I find myself giving her the advice, but I'm able to catch myself faster and say, wait a minute, that's not what she's looking for, and back out of it. And so I do see exactly what you're talking about, that you can learn how to catch yourself faster and
At cheaper prices.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the goal. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress.
There you go.
And people have to be able to be comfortable with that, because a lot of times people are very perfectionistic and they say, oh, I didn't do that perfectly. I'm a horrible person and I've done damage to my relationship. That's not necessarily true. I believe that your partner can see the progress that you are making and that will make an impact on them, even if they don't outwardly acknowledge it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I never contract to save somebody's marriage. We're not here to save your marriage. We are here to get you to a place as a couple where each one of you can honestly, or more honestly, say, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
If this is who I am, can you still choose me?
Mm-hmm.
And both of them say yes, then you can find a way forward to improve that experience.
Mm-hmm.
If one of you says no, then the honest, progressive answer is separation, divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not here, not taking your money to guarantee that you won't get divorced.
Right.
We're going to look at this, and we're going to look at who you are, who you experience yourself to be, who you want this other person to see, and ask, given that this is who I am, do you still choose me?
Right.
A lot of people get into marriages because you're almost enough. I see so much in you, and I think that if we get married over the course of time,
I'll
I
change.
can fix those pieces to my satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Never works.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. But the difference between couples therapy and individual therapy is that while you are seeing the couple is your client and not the individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, my philosophy is I'm going to strive to help you repair the marriage to the best that we are capable of until you tell me that that is no longer your focus and your desire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you would agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not a guarantee.
I remember a couple vividly that I saw every week for a year. And the last time that I saw them, they came in again together, as they had done every week for a year. And the wife hands the divorce papers to the guy and said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I waited until this morning to give you these papers so that you know, and we're in a safe place, and you have somebody to talk to, because I'm leaving. She got and left. And the guy looked at me and said, did you know this? And I said, no. She hadn't spoken to me privately. We have not had this conversation. He sat there for a couple of minutes and he said, where's the refund window?
Wow.
And that was the last time I ever saw either one of them.
That is deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also as an indication, you don't know. You
Right.
don't necessarily see. And
Right.
especially if you're not communicating back channel with either one of them, you don't know. You just see what they bring to the table.
Yeah. Did you feel blindsided?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would too. I would, that is not how I would want a session like that to go. So if you want to do Psych with Mike a favor, you can find us on the interwebs, on the YouTubes at Psych with Mike, and subscribe to the show. We would really appreciate that. You can find us on the Apple Podcasts at Psych with Mike and leave us a comment and a rating, and that helps other people find the show, which is super fantastic and helpful. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue, and if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.